All right, welcome to episode 3 of Let's Talk. I'm Brian McKeon, your host, here with Ken Carman from 92.3 The Fan in Cleveland. Ken, how you doing?
Doing well. How are you? How's yourself?
I'm doing well. It's a crazy time in the world right now for sure, but I'm glad that you can join me for this, and we can talk a little bit about your career and what you've been through, especially in with all the sporting news that's come out of Cleveland in the last couple of years. It's pretty crazy, but I saw a
hmm
video on Twitter about a day ago about you cleaning up after the riots the other morning in the city of Cleveland. Can you just talk about a little bit of that? That was pretty inspiring stuff that you were doing there.
What? No, I just honestly, I just went down. I didn't want to put anything out on social media or anything like that. A buddy of mine did take a picture and then he posted it, and because my buddy Hayden is he's a media figure himself, and so he had a bunch of people going down, and he had put out that he was doing it. I think on Saturday night he said he was going to do it on Sunday, and I think I saw some posts late Saturday night because I fell asleep on the couch like 10:30, and then I just felt a little guilty, to be honest with you. Just because again, people ask like about like what futures hold and things like that. We don't really know, but I've always been in Northeast Ohio, so I felt I kind of owed it. And so I got to tell you, a lot of the heavy work was already done. I got there about 9:30. A lot of the heavy work was already done by the time I got there. A lot of people had already done a whole lot already. So I thought there were some people who were critical of the cleanup for whatever reason. You're not always going to please everybody, but I thought it was a pretty cathartic situation for everybody involved. There were people who were black, white, Asian, whatever, Latino, didn't matter, and they were all pitching in to try to clean it up. And I thought that was a pretty nice thing. There's a lot of cities that are dealing with this, and the reasoning behind it is a strong reason. And I really did feel that, like, listen, if we got to go through this to learn a lesson, these are things, and I hate that this is happening, and I don't want anybody to be hurt. But if this is one of the things that we have to go through to learn a lesson, then I guess we have to do this because we did this about 4 years ago, 5 years ago. They did this in the early 90s. They did it in the 70s and 60s, and a lot of things haven't changed. So I'm hoping that the one thing that we are changing here is that I do think that maybe generations look at it a little bit differently, but you know because my experience might be one way, I think a lot of other people's experience hasn't been the other. So I think that Monday was a really eye-opening day on air with it, but yeah, it was certainly a lesson to be learned and something that's eye-opening, to say the least.
It's certainly well said on your part, and definitely a great move out of you by doing that. It shows a lot about your character. So you
Well,
go.
it was again, it wasn't, it's a small part. There was just I was just happy with thousands of people that I saw walking around, and there was a lot of downtown residents who they don't have. I live next to a swamp, for crying out loud, and I got some woods behind me, so I kind of got some things to clean up some stuff, and there were a lot of people who they're downtown residents, and they have supervisors and things like that who take care of that. That's part of their rent or part of their mortgage of what they pay. And so I was really inspired just by people who were wearing some gloves and saying, "Hey, give me a broom," or something like that. I thought that those people were really something. The people who live downtown were willing to come down the steps and venture out there, and they didn't have much, but they were gonna at least lend their bodies and support and some manpower.
Absolutely. So you grew up in Cleveland. And
I grew up in Canton. It's about 60 miles south of Cleveland, but
home of the
northeast Ohio.
home of the Football Hall of Fame, I believe, correct?
Yep, yep, yep.
But anyway, so you grew up around the Cleveland sports scene as it is, and what were the teams that really you latched onto at first? Was it the Browns, because I know it's a fairly big Browns town, or was there something else that brought it in with you?
My mom's a big Browns fan. My dad was always a big Dolphins fan. So when the Browns left in '95, it's easy to latch onto that. And I've always had an affinity for my father, obviously, and so the Dolphins have always held a special spot. Um, I would say that the '90s Indians were probably the most special. Most kids, because an NFL game NFL stadiums, no matter where you're from, can be a surly place. So, you tend to wait a little bit. You tend to wait till the kids are maybe in double-digit age. So I see some young kids over at the stadium, and they've done a lot over the last few years in all NFL stadiums to make it more family-friendly. But we still see the videos on a Monday morning. What happened in the bathroom and things like that. So most people's first experience at a professional sporting event is at baseball. And so my first experience was at an Indians game. So that was the first one I went to. And so they were the first one that I really liked. Like Albert Bell, of all people, was my favorite player, and simply
Wow.
just because he hit the first home run I ever saw. And he ended up being a pretty prolific home run hitter for the time he was active and really, really good at it. But the Browns fandom is rooted in basically the people who are in the area, because my father, he's not a big Browns fan, but he hates the Steelers. Just hates the Steelers. And the surrounding areas in Canton and Youngstown, Akron's got a lot of Browns fans. But in Youngstown and Canton, in that area, the corner of the state, there are a lot of Steelers fans mixed in with the Browns fans. And my dad just can't stand them, can't stand their fans, can't stand the team, can't stand the colors, can't stand the whole thing. So it was easy to latch on to the Browns and easy to do that, just because, you kind of follow your father. And, my father was a little upset that I wasn't going to be a big-time Dolphins fan, but he was certainly happy I wasn't going to be a Steelers fan.
So, how was Cleveland Municipal Stadium, if I can ask? Was it a dump? Was it the old
I
kind of
went,
dump that the reputation it has?
uh, I wish I could say something else, but yeah. I mean, it was, because we love it so much because we remember it for good sports, or good football anyway. The baseball team was lousy at that time, but we remember it for good football. And it wasn't always that way. The 60s were great. The 50s and late 40s, when the team first started, were great. Obviously, I wasn't around for that. The 80s were fantastic. There was one season in the 90s that was really, really good. But there was a lot of strife. Belichick's years were not altogether great. When he released Bernie, that was a very ugly time, and then the team turned around and moved. So I got to go there a handful of times as a young kid. And I saw it. I remember when I was 7, 8, 9 years old. First time I ever went, I was 5. That was the first Indians game I ever went to. But I remember being a little nervous about the upper deck. For whatever reason, I thought the upper deck could cave in or whatever. Because, again, it's an old stadium. It's built in like 33 through 36. So it was an old place. They had the old trough bathrooms. Everything was set up. On an old stadium, you don't realize it now because there's not many of them left, that everything was just basically to get you in to watch the game. Now everything's set up for everything else. Everything's set up for concessions and loges and clubs, the separate clubs that are around the stadium. You didn't get that then. It was just get you in the ballpark, get you to your seat, and deal with it then. Municipal Stadium was so great because even though it was this big round area, and where the football field was, because it went straight down the middle, the 50-yard line was actually the furthest part away from the field, and it would kind of enclose in as you came in. So it was really weird. In like the 70s, you see the videos about how people sat, and then there started to be just a packed house every single week in the 80s, and you would see some of that. Now I didn't get to go until the 90s. When I went in the 90s, I went for a couple of Browns preseason games. That was fun. The old man wouldn't take me to a regular season game because, even though he's a Dolphins fan, he had been in the dog pound. He knows what went on in the dog pound. The stories are prolific about sneaking kegs in through dog houses. A lot of the booze that went on, a lot of the debauchery that went on. He went up there. There was a thing they used to do with one of the local promotions called the World Series of Rock here. And so they would get, like, it was like an all-day festival, and they would get like 6, 7, 8 bands somewhere in there. And my dad was a van enthusiast, and he had one of those like 70s vans. Like,
That's awesome.
he had all those guys, who had like all the great big like designs on the side of the van. He had this blue 75 Chevy van with a 350 in it. I mean, the thing hauled ass. And they had it carpeted inside, and he had the Rolling Stones refrigerator that was built into the side of the van. I mean, the thing was great. And this is way before I was born. He and his best friend, who I used to call Uncle Dave, and my mom and a bunch of their friends, they used to pile in the van and do God knows what. And so I always just assumed I was conceived out in the parking lot in '86 somewhere.
Of a rock
Okay,
concert,
it was either that or a van in, they used to call him, or a truck in, they used to call him, for the van enthusiasts back in the 70s and 80s. So, yeah, the memories I have of the stadium probably started from pre-birth all the way till about I was 9, 10 years old when they started tearing it down.
And Cleveland's a big rock town, actually. The Rock and Roll Hall of Fame's home to there. And your station 92.3 used to be a rock station before it was, but it's now format, which is pretty cool. The last song, do you know the last song ever played on the rock station before it went over to sports?
I can remember. For whatever reason, I'm trying to remember, and I can't remember the
It's
name
Second
of the song.
Chance by the band Shinedown, which is one of my favorite bands. So when I was getting ready for this interview, I saw that and I was like, wow, that's like one of my favorite bands. Just that they were they were the last band performed on your station. But I work with you on CBS Sports Radio a lot, and your intro is for Whom the Bell Tolls by Metallica.
Mm-hmm.
So is it safe to assume you're a big metalhead over here, Ken?
I mean, I'm pretty eclectic. Depending on my mood. But yeah, I like. I'm not my producer. My producer hosts because we're right next door to the classic rock station. The classic rock station's been a classic rock station since 1985 when they started that. When they started WNCX, and it's one of those. It's basically a heritage station now when you consider it. But I like my favorite bands. I'm pretty eclectic about it, but when it comes to rock, it's like Metallica. AC/DC. I'm one of the few people who admit I like Brian Johnson more than I like Bon Scott.
Wow.
Sorry. It's true.
That's not a bad take. It's not a bad take.
Yeah, well, when people hear that, they get really heated with me, and I go, listen, man, I respect what he did before he died, but I grew up on Brian Johnson. I like Brian Johnson. That's the guy I like. When it comes to just music in general, like those are still two top 5 bands. I actually got to see AC/DC before Malcolm died.
Wow.
So that was and I actually got to see him when Phil Rudd was drumming for him before he had the whole episode over in New Zealand or Australia where he tried to get the guy killed. It was so great because we went to Columbus, and it was the night before Ohio State, Michigan. And so we went to Columbus. We got to see AC/DC. Well, we went on a Thursday, yeah, because the night before was a Friday. We went to see AC/DC, and then on Saturday we went to Ohio State, Michigan. Loudest concert I ever went to. Tickets cost $106. I remember the price. It was $106. I was right along the long ramp that he came in because they were on their Black Ice tour.
Wow,
and
okay.
So I remember because I got to see Angus Young right up there, and he was doing just full of sweat and just wearing the shorts because that's the thing. He's basically shirtless 5 minutes into the show.
And he's almost
so you got to
nude
be
the
there,
entire
or you're gonna miss him in the full outfit. So it was him, and then I got to slap hands with Brian Johnson, which I was over the moon about. So that's part of the reason. And my favorite, but back to the Rudd thing, was that you saw him, and it was just like the classic rock of it, because I got a highlighter here. He's just playing the drums, but he's got a cigarette dangling out of his mouth while he's playing the drums. I mean, this is 2007? So there's definitely anti-smoking laws about smoking indoors.
And they don't care.
In the state of Ohio, and he's just playing it. And you could see, because we were sitting close enough, I couldn't believe the lights would go out, and you could see Brian Johnson walking over to have a smoke, and like you would see the cherry light up like this, and he'd put it down and go off. I'm like, geez, man, you're singing your ass off, or you're smoking cigarettes. My favorite song by them is it's very specific. It's 1991 Live at Donington's version of Whole Lotta Rosie.
Wow.
I don't like Bon Scott's version. Sorry. I don't like it as much, okay? But I like Brian Johnson. They got the big inflatable Rosie, which they had for the Black Ice tour, and he sounded great doing it.
Yep.
That's why I like. They're still a great live band. I like Leonard Skinner, but I never went to see Leonard Skinner. They died, a lot of the members died in 77. Ronnie died in 77. So I never went to see Leonard Skinner because basically, I got nothing against Johnny Van Zant, but Johnny ain't bad, but Johnny ain't Ronnie. So I never really went. And a lot of my buddies said, man, you're really missing out. They put on a hell of a show. Sorry I never went. I was very happy. Sadly, I was very happy, relieved even, that I got to see Tom Petty before he died. Tom Petty's probably my favorite, definitely my favorite out of the bunch, even though Leonard Skinner's right up there, but I love Tom Petty. I was happy to see him. I saw him at Blossom. It's Steve Winwood opened for him. And my buddy got so low. I didn't realize he was so loaded. My buddy got so loaded before the show. And I remember he passed out on my friend's tailgate. My friend drove this little Ford Ranger, and we woke him up. He's like, "Did he play Higher Love yet?" Like he didn't He didn't remember any of it. So I remember the Tom Petty concert was one of the best ever. One of the best bands I've ever seen live. You're gonna be shocked.
Okay.
We went to Crew Fest, and like Vince Neil looks like me now. So he's running around, and basically you're singing the songs for him. And I mean, listen, what makes you upset about Vince Neil, Brian,
Hmm.
is that Mick Mars, who has debilitating back issues, where he's basically, I hate this, I mean, he's basically an invalid at times until
Yep.
he gets his treatment, until he got his treatment. They basically wheel him out there like he's Hannibal Lecter. And you can't see him at first, and then all of a sudden you're the wing, and then you see him, and I mean, you see these frail, bonish fingers, and he's still working the thing, and he's still out there giving it his all, and the curtain would drop, and the fireworks start going off behind Blossom, and they all start going on, and it's like, da, 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 and it's so good. It was so good. And Tommy's still on it, and they're all still on it, and then here comes Vince Neil, and he just doesn't give a damn. And or at least he might still think he looks like he did in the 80s, because he just is this leather vest on and there's this gut, and he's out of breath already. He's out of breath already.
I've seen them
And
11 times, Ken.
You've seen Motley Crue 11 times?
11 times.
Oh, then you know what I'm talking about.
I know exactly what you're talking about.
I mean, yes.
I went out to Los Angeles to see their final 3 concerts when they were retiring. They were retiring, and I high-fived Tommy Lee as he was walking on the second stage. So I've got that same kind of Brian Johnson story that you told.
Oh,
I have a Motley Crue tattoo, so I'm a huge Motley Crue guy.
I didn't know that. Oh,
yeah.
Man. Oh, they were great. I was glad I saw, but the one I hated Buck Cherry. I didn't like him live.
Really?
I don't like him recorded. I'm sorry. Couldn't stand him. And hey, and for every band that someone hates, there's a billion people who love them. If that's what you like, I'm not insulting anybody personally.
And the AC/DC tour, the Black Ice tour, was actually my first concert when they played New Jersey.
No kidding.
That was my first concert.
Did the Answer open up for them?
No, Buck Cherry actually was the opening act for them that night.
Oh, really?
Yeah, that was my first experience.
When I went and saw them on that tour, they had a band called The Answer open up for them, and I don't know what happened to them. They were really good. They just didn't go as big as they did. But real quick, the one band that I was so surprised they were really good live was Papa Roach. I swear to God, they were so energetic and they were so good live, and I'm just sitting there going, this is the band that everybody like makes fun of on TRL and things like that. Like, this is Papa Roach. Like, holy Toledo, these guys got some great talent here. I mean, they were really kicking ass and doing really well. But I've been blessed. There's been a couple of shows I've been blessed to see. I mean, Crew Fest was still a good time. I got to see Sweaty Teddy for free right outside the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. They put on like a free concert. Me and my buddy went up there, and he was great. He was great. You know, whatever about politics, whatever. I'm not here for that. But he was great live, man. The Great White Buffalo, and he hit the thing dead on the mark. Like, he was good.
Other than sporting events, concerts are the only really other big thing that I do. So I've been to over 100 concerts in my life. I am crazy about it. I actually saw 2 years ago. You'll find this interesting. I saw AC/DC. I've seen them 3 times, and I saw Axl Rose singing for them when Brian Johnson was kicked out of the band a couple years ago. And Axl Rose was singing for them on stage at Madison Square Garden. It was pretty good, actually. Surprisingly, he actually sounded good.
It's a shame. It's a shame with all that other stuff that happened, just because, like, you know, he used to sing. I think when he was in school, he used to sing in different ranges just to throw off his teachers and make them upset. Like, the talent that he actually does possess. Mm-hmm. It's a shame some of the other stuff overshadows it, because he is obviously an incredibly talented musician.
For sure.
About Axl Rose. Guns N' Roses is definitely one of my favorite bands. I will admit, I have a guilty pleasure. Guns N' Roses, I put in a separate category. I think they're a little bit more heavy, but like, I'll just be honest with you. Motley Crue, Warrant, Cinderella, Poison. Oh my God, Poison. Yeah, I got a bit of a guilty pleasure for 80s glam rock.
Nothing wrong with that. So do I.
There's another term for it, but I'll clean it up for you.
So we've taken up a lot of time doing rock music, which is totally fine with me.
That's fine.
I got to know part of this interview though. How did you get into sports radio? What was it that brought you in? Because you're the morning host in Cleveland right now.
I wanted to be a sports writer. And then I did a radio project. With my speech class when I was in high school, and which is actually this, but this is when I do the Zooms on some of the other shows that I do. So I left that back there. Usually I got other things that are hanging back there. Sorry. When this is all over, I'll put the other things back up and get rid of the flag. But when I was in high school, I did a radio project, and basically I just wanted to be a sports writer. And my assistant principal happened to be in the room. We used to do it from the announcer's booth in the school office when we did the radio show project. It was just a project for a speech class. And my assistant principal happened to go into the room, and he heard it. And Mr. Gregory, and he talked to me, and he said, you should really try this. I says, okay. And so, I didn't really study that hard in high school, and I didn't really get. I got decent enough grades. I got a 2.5. Like, it was just basically do your homework, and that was it. And if I could take anything back, I would. I don't have many regrets. I always tell people, and because I get a lot of kids who send me emails like, "How do I get into this?" And I always say, "Listen, man. Like, one, try a lot harder than I did in high school, because I don't want to say I fell into it because you got to work hard, but if he would have never walked in the room, who knows?" Two, because I thought I wanted to be a sports writer. You got to have good grades to get into a good journalism school. So that was stupid of me. Two, I would have majored in something else. Just for the simple thought of, like, listen, Akron's a good school and I'm proud of Akron. All right. But I learned more with the student radio station than I did in any communications class about how to actually be on air. So in both when I do the radio shows and when I do the TV stuff, I've learned more about that from those programs than I ever really did in a classroom. And Akron still does, even though they've fallen on some hard times because of the virus here recently. They still have some really good teachers and some really good programs that if I would have known, if I would have been smarter about, I would have taken advantage of them. Because I tell people, unless you're going to, I don't know where you went to school, Brian, but like I tell people, unless you're going to Syracuse, Ball State, Emerson, a handful of other schools. Communications, okay, fine. You got a great alumni base. You can get some help from them. You make contacts. You're off and running. And you get some really good instruction in that case. But there's a lot of people, like, listen, they can help you out a little bit, but you either got it or you don't. And there's plenty of colleges out there that they're willing to take your money whether you got it or you don't. Mm-hmm. So, like, if you got it, I didn't really need to go to school to get it. If I don't got it, I don't need to go to school to get it because I'm not going to get it anyway. You're really either is or you ain't when it comes down to it. I hate that saying, but that's what I actually love that saying. It's an old football coach used to use that. You either is or you ain't. And so you either have it or you don't. And I always encourage people to try to do it if they tell me, because I don't want to throw anybody off or dissuade them. I just use it the same way as acting. Have a backup, but it's one life. It's your dream. Go ahead and try it out. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. But I don't want you to sit there at 45, 50 years old and, well, what could have been? I don't want anybody to do that. But if you're going to go to school, if you're going to go to college, you really got to make the college work for you. So sometimes I think people get a little bit mixed up when I give that advice to them.
Yeah, for sure. Ken, around the Cleveland area, the Browns are the big team, right? That's what takes over no matter what. Is it if the Indians are playing well, but the Browns are also playing well? Is it still a Browns town? Does it matter at all?
It's tough to answer. I don't want to say yes. There's a very strong contingent of strong Indians fans, but they're very defensive over the Indians. Mm-hmm. And because the Browns have been slop for a long time, and the Indians have been a very successful organization. They just haven't won a World Series. They've done a great job. Their front office has been great.
They got pretty damn close.
Yeah, and so people get very defensive over the Indians because of that, because the attendance isn't great. Mm-hmm. It was great in the 90s, obviously, but the Browns weren't there. There was disposable income for it. Now, the demographics have changed. I think the sport in general has changed. People take in sports has changed. I think that's all hurt baseball. And I think it's hurt the Indians too. So the hardcore Indians fan gets very defensive. So it's this weird line that you have to walk where I think it's a good sports town. I've had arguments with people about it. But yeah, I think football is big in Cleveland, the way it's the biggest thing in Pittsburgh, the way it's the biggest thing in Wisconsin, the way it's the biggest thing in a lot of places. I mean, it's football. And it's easier, even though it's harder to follow, it's easier for the casual fan to follow than it is baseball, because I always liken baseball to a friend, even to a best friend. I don't need to call my best friend every single day. All right. Baseball, people don't watch every single day. Some people do, but a lot of people don't watch every single day. Football, it's only there for 10 at home. It's only there for 10 dates out of the year.
It's not
I mean, 10
difficult to
out of
follow.
365. It's even though the sport itself is hardest to follow because of all the different movement. It's the easiest thing for fans, casual fans, to follow.
Yeah, for sure. And but so you work Browns pre and post in Cleveland, which is a pretty cool gig to have, I guess, because of the popularity of the team, especially now with the Baker stuff and then picking up Odell. They're picking up a lot of traction. So you spend time around the locker room. Are there any crazy stories about Odell? How is he as a guy? What about Baker too? Because he seems like a pretty flamboyant personality too.
Baker's pretty quiet in the locker room. I've never had any issue with him at all. None at all. Odell is the same way. I've never had any issue with him at all. But I rarely ever spoke to Odell, and every time he was with the media, he was wonderful. So I have no issue with him. There are guys, but I don't really speak to them too terribly much. There are other players that, yes, I speak to a lot. Off air, because Nick Chubb does not speak to the media very much at all. He doesn't like that. He doesn't like that attention. He's very quiet, very quiet. Nick Chubb, I adore because he's such a good guy, and because if I ask him a question at his locker while we're away from things, he is more than happy to answer those questions. He likes to talk football, and that's it. And so he's okay with that. And I'm not trying to, crack jokes or anything like that. A couple of the other guys, obviously I get along well with the offensive linemen because I pay attention to the offensive line.
Mm-hmm.
The other guy, and it's rough because I know a lot of people have been critical of him here over the last couple of months. And, what he did is what he did. Myles Garrett is one of the best people to talk to. His father is one of the best people to talk to. Right next door to him is Olivier Vernon. Olivier's great. But as far as wild stories, man, they because they're really young and I'm getting older. So some of the wilder stories aren't what they used to be. Like I've told this story on air many times. I can tell you. Like we had a one time Willis McGahee spent a season here.
Uh-huh.
I think at the very end of his career, might have been the last year he was in the NFL. And we are in the locker room and it's media availability. Well, Willis has been in the league so long, he doesn't care who sees him and what condition he's in. He don't care. The locker room is his place, and he's a veteran now. Like you because the Browns have had so many young guys because they did the complete retooling thing.
Mm-hmm.
The media goes in there, guys go hide. They go in the training room, they're out of there, and a lot of people, rightfully so, because I've always hated this person. I hate having to go in the locker room. It's just. I wouldn't like you in my bathroom. I don't know why we have to be in the locker room when we could just all go meet. Now, there's hardcore writers who feel much differently than I do, and they got to go and get a story. And frankly, they don't have the access that I get sometimes. So I remain respectful of that. Mm-hmm. But I would always be a bit uncomfortable too. But Willis didn't give a damn. He didn't care. And there were certain players that didn't care. Like Phil Taylor didn't care at all. But Willis really didn't care. And one day, Willis is just as naked as the day he's born. It says, okay, there we go. My computer went crazy for a second. Willis is naked as the day he's born. And he sits down, and other guys sit down, and he wants to play cards. And so he's playing cards, and there's an open seat, and he goes, Kenny, hey. And somebody might have told him, I had only talked to him one time in my life, but he got my name just to get my attention. He goes, what are you doing? I said, and I'm like holding a microphone. I'm like, waiting on an interview. He goes, sit down. Get in. I'm like, I don't think I can play cards with you, Willis. Why not? I don't think I can afford to play cards like you. Oh, and then he's like, BS, that time. He goes, we'll take it easy. Sit down. I'm like, no. And then he looks at my buddy Jason right now. Sit down. Play. He's like, I can't. He goes, I'll steal both of your money. Sit down. I'm like, I can't. They're going to throw me out of here if I sit here and I play cards with you, okay? He was adamant. He wanted to play cards. Basically, he just wanted to lift money out of our wallet. Yeah. And I'm going, well, I mean, it was bizarre because he was insistent that we play cards. I'm like, you just smell fresh fish. That's all you smell. And this was early in the season. So I go, I know you think you're just going to take money from us, and I'm not going to sit down and start playing cards. They're going to boot my ass out of here if some member of the media just sits down and starts throwing down 20s with one of the players. That's not how any of this works. And he knows it because he's been in the league that long, but maybe he just figured, I'm in my last year. I'm a veteran.
He didn't care.
I need a fifth to play cards here. Sit out at this box that I've draped over with a towel and play cards.
Interesting.
I'm not sitting there next to Willis McGahee naked playing cards, even though the story's fantastic if I were to actually play cards with him. I just couldn't do it.
Yeah, I mean, and it's a little bit uncomfortable too. Did you spend a lot of time around the LeBron Cavs, that era team? Because I'm sure there's
that was a different story.
There's got to be a J.R. Smith story in there, right?
No, because
really?
You'd have to ask Lima. Lima's the guy you have to ask because I stayed away. It became a bit on the show, and it's actually something I also regret. Because I didn't see the Cavs win until just this year. I'd been to 13 Cavs games before LeBron came back the second time. The first ever Cavs game I went to, because I like the Cavs more than the other two teams in town. People always think I love the Browns the most. I actually love the Cavs the most as a fan. So people always assume that I like the Browns and we don't pay too much attention. It was different because my dad doesn't like basketball. And when I was a kid, like I like Michael Jordan just like any kid my age because I was 3 years old when the shot happened. I didn't know much better. And if I was 10, I probably would have hated Michael Jordan. But I love Michael Jordan. And I love the Cavs. And the Cavs weren't that great when I was really getting into basketball. And because the Cavs weren't that great, and they seemed to always be number 3 in the city. And I had just started listening to sports talk radio at the time when I was like 10, 11 years old, somewhere in there. And I remember that the guy who was on the air at the time in the afternoons, a guy named Kenny Rhoda, who was on at now the competing station in the area. Now he's on in Canton at WHBC. He would give a warning basically like, hey, man, you guys don't go to these games. They're going to move. Like they could very well move. And so I just was like, well, you got to support the team because you don't want them to move. And it wasn't like he was out there pounding it every day, but he said, listen, you guys got to go out there and watch them or they're gonna move. You guys better be careful.
Yeah.
And so I started watching them, and my dad just didn't like basketball, and I loved basketball. So I knew I wasn't going to ever go to a game while I was a kid. And so I didn't go to my first game until college, and they lost by 31. Then they lost by 18. This is with LeBron. They lost by 31. They lost by 18 the second day, and then they just kept losing. So I went to like 4 games with LeBron, and then LeBron left, and I got I got my job at the station, and I kept going to games, and they kept losing. And so it turned into I went to 13 Cavs games. They lost all 13 of those games. LeBron came back. And because this is what fans do, we all think that we're the reason why our favorite teams win and lose.
Of course.
I was like, man, if I go to a game, yeah, they're probably going to win or something really bad could happen. And if I go to a game and he gets hurt or something like that, like I'm going to feel pretty guilty.
You're the curse.
Yeah. So I didn't go the whole time LeBron was back. I regret that now because it was really stupid.
Mm-hmm.
But I went to my first game since LeBron was back. My buddy Brian has really good season, been a season ticket holder. He's the second longest Cavs season ticket holder in the team's history. His family is. So they had really good seats, and I got to see Vince Carter up close. Trey Young started yelling at a ref, and I stood up. Now I know not to cuss in at professional games or any game whatsoever because they'll throw you out easily for that.
Mm-hmm.
But I remember I said we were right behind the Hawks bench. Trey Young's down at the end of the bench. He's yelling at one of the refs. And I just pipe out. I stand up. I go, you tee him up. He hasn't earned it yet. Tee him up. And all of a sudden I look over and I go to sit down and I sit down and I look over. Trey Young's to my left and I look over and Vince Carter is about 6 feet away. And he's looking right at me, and I'm looking up, and I go, and he goes, and I go, what? And he goes, you need to knock it off right now.
Wow.
And I went, okay. He's like, okay then. And I'm like, oh my God. Because I'm 33. Vince Carter's over 40 now.
Legend.
So this is basically like and I've been watching Vince Carter since I was a child.
Exactly.
I felt like my dad told me to knock it off.
And you sat down, I'm sure.
I swear to God, like I'm serious. If it was like if JaVale McGee would have told me to shut up, like I probably would have been thrown out of the building. But Vince Carter, who is a Hall of Famer, who I dearly respect as a player and probably as a person too, even though I don't know the guy, so what the hell, right? Like I'm going, oh my God, my dad just yelled at me. I mean, I was quiet, and I went, and he like was looking over, and I'm like, man, am I gonna get thrown out of here? Like because we saw the stuff with Kyle Lowry and all the other stuff. I'm like,
oh yeah.
Please don't throw me out of here. Please don't throw me out. And there was the best thing ever. There's a Quicken Loans Arena, or now Fieldhouse, security guard who's sitting like right there. And he's like looking over at me, and I go, could he throw me out of here? Could he be getting me thrown out of here? And he's like, he might. And I'm like, oh my God, no. I'll be quiet the rest of the game, please. But the Cavs ended up winning. They ended up winning going away.
That would have been a great story, though.
Yeah, so I know I've told a lot of long-winded stuff here, but yeah, I had to get that one off my chest. Sorry.
No, I'm glad. I appreciate that story. That's a great one. What a story it would have been for the Cleveland Morning host to get thrown out of the building by Vince Carter.
We told it the next day. We told, and it was weird. One of the photographers for the Cavs actually caught what looks like the incident. It's actually something else, but it's Vince Carter in the foreground and me yelling in the background. It's like, oh my God. And it actually looks like it was the exchange, but I'm like, no, he's on the floor in this. He was way closer in this. Like he was 5-6 feet away, and it felt like my father all over again.
Well, Ken, I really appreciate your time. There's some great stories in this interview, so I really appreciate it. And I hope you're staying safe during all the stuff that's going on in the world right now. I appreciate the time. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. It's a weird perspective because you're in New York, right?
New York, yeah.
So it seems to be, and you don't like to take these type of things lightly because I'm a little bit out in the suburbs of Ohio, and Ohio, thankfully we had a governor who really got after it, and I was thankful for that. But it's a weird perspective because in New York and LA, I always have to remain mindful that it's a much bigger population. Like we're 7th in population. It's not like Ohio. It's not like I'm living in the middle of Montana here, but it's always weird because when I talk to people from New York and LA and in Chicago, it's I have to be mindful of that and I have to be respectful of that. So I hope everybody can do the same because it's a weird thing. This is not the same reality for all of us, and I think it teaches us, especially with everything else going on, about respect for one another.
That's well said, Ken. Again, thanks for your time. I really appreciate it.
Well, thanks for having me.